This lecture deals with Engel curves, another key concept in microeconomics. Now we ask the question, how does consumption for one good change when income changes? Previously we had studied how consumers adjust their consumption bundles in the case of two goods when income changes, which was analyzed using the income consumption curve. And now we shift the focus to just one single good and ask how the quantity demanded of this specific single good responds to changes in income when prices are held constant. And now to answer this question systematically, we will make use of the concept of Engel curves, and we will explain how they are derived from income consumption curves. Let us start with the situation of normal goods. So in case of two normal goods, we have already seen from the income consumption curve that income increases lead to increases in the consumption of both goods. So the line connecting the optimal consumption values is upward sloping and does not bend backwards or something like that. So it's continuously increasing. So the income consumption curve or the income expansion path is increasing continuously, and that we know already from the previous video. Now, how can we get from this to the Engel curve? In this case, we slightly change the space here, and we have on the horizontal axis demand for good 1. But on the vertical axis, we don't have demand of good 2 anymore, but instead we have income here. And the Engel curve is now the consumption of good x1 for an increase in income. And for normal goods, this curve is upward sloping. So as income increases, the demand for this particular good would also increase. So for normal goods, the Engel curve is upward sloping, consumption increases monotonically with income. How does this change if we have a good that is at least partly inferior? So for some income levels, it is an inferior good. In this case, we can again plot the income consumption curve or the income expansion curve, where we would have the situation that for low income levels, so starting at this optimal point here, an expansion of income leads to an expansion of the consumption of good x1 and x2. But if we increase income further in this situation here, we would end up at a consumption level that is lower than this consumption level here for good x1. And that means nothing else than x1 is a normal good up to the income range at which the income consumption curve bends backwards, and from that point onwards where it bends backwards, the good is an inferior good. Again, we can then go from the income consumption curve to the Engel curve by changing the vertical axis. So we would have income instead of the second good here. And here we again have consumption of good 1. Now we see the Engel curve would also be increasing up to the point here. And in this range, the good is a normal good, right? So it's demand increases when income increases. However, from that point onwards, demand decreases when income rises further. So from that point onwards, this good is an inferior good. So the Engel curve depicting demand for the good in relation to the income level of the consumer, this Engel curve would bend backwards from some point onwards. And now we can illustrate the Engel curves for different goods. So here we had the normal good, that was Engel curve number 1 as we had it before and as I called it here. So this is strictly monotonically increasing. So as income rises, consumption of this good increases. So that's the standard case of a normal good. Here Engel curve 2 refers to a partly inferior good. Initially, as income increases, consumption of this good also increases, but then from some point of income onwards, consumption decreases, and from this point onwards, this good is a partly inferior good. And then we can also illustrate something like a more luxury good, so that would be Engel curve 3, that should be 3, not 1 here. And in case of a luxury good, for example, people would not consume anything up to the point where a certain income level is reached, and only then demand for this good will become positive. For example, think about jewelries. You would not spend income on jewelries if you cannot buy your subsistence consumption needs and so on. But then if your income rises, then consumption of these luxury goods would even rise steeper than income increases. So the demand for luxury goods would have an income elasticity that is greater than 1. So the Engel curve of such a good would typically look like a concave curve. So we can summarize. Engel curves show how demand for a single good changes as income changes. For normal goods, the demand would rise with income monotonically. For inferior goods, demand would decrease, at least from a certain point of income levels onwards. And therefore, some goods may switch from being a normal good to being an inferior good, depending on the income level. So you can think about, again, bus traveling or something like that. So if you have a very low income, you may not make any vacations anyway. So you don't have any demand for bus traveling or traveling whatsoever. Then income increases, and perhaps the first types of travel that you would do is by bus. So the demand for bus traveling would increase. But from some income level onwards, you would maybe want to go to some more or fancier destinations. You would fly somewhere and so on. And from that point onwards, you would decrease your demand for bus traveling again. So bus traveling would be a normal good up to a certain income level. And from that onwards, if income rises further, you would substitute away from bus traveling and towards perhaps air traveling or something else, right? And luxury goods would be characterized by concave Engel curves. And Engel curves in general are again a key building block in understanding the consumer behavior in the demand analysis in microeconomics.